Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. Good mail day today. I got the new version of the Miyoo Flip. Now this one was sent over directly from Miyoo, and I got a few of them in the mail, so let's take a look at all the differences that have changed from the version 1 that came out a couple months ago to this one here today. I also want to talk a little bit about why I like the Miyoo Flip so much. I've been using the version 1 right here for several months at this point, and it's one of my most played handhelds, despite the fact that I don't think it's a super good value and there is room for improvement. So let's start by taking a look inside of the box, and this all looks very familiar, exactly like the version 1, so I don't think anything's changed between the box as well as the case that it comes with. The insides look to be very similar as well. We've got a USB-A to USB-C charging cable, a plastic screen protector, which honestly I wouldn't recommend using. It's not really going to provide much protection. It also comes with a 64GB microSD card, which will be preloaded with the software as well as some games, and then we also have a USB microSD card reader. We've also got a quick start manual that will walk you through some of the basic instructions, and then of course the device itself. Now, like I mentioned before, Miyoo themselves sent me these review units, and so I'm getting them right off the press directly from the actual manufacturer. They also sent me an email saying exactly what they changed with version 2, so let's go over those. So the first thing is that they say the hinge was upgraded to a full metal hinge, which is stronger than the semi-metal hinge of the Nintendo 3DS. Now here's my version 1 of the Miyoo Flip, and yes, this one has an all-plastic hinge, and you can kind of feel it right here as you move it across because it does kind of snap into place, and yeah, it feels a little bit cheap, but like I mentioned in my video, I don't really mind how cheap it feels. I think it just kind of goes part and parcel with this overall cheap feeling and Nintendo Advance SP looking device. And I found that it is super polarizing because some people don't mind it or don't even notice it, where other people completely hate it. And I'm obviously in the side that actually likes it. And so if they are going to improve the version 2 of the Miyoo Flip in terms of the hinge, I don't really mind that because I kind of like the cheap feeling, but yeah, it could be better. So here's a look at the version 2 one, and you can immediately hear the difference between the two. It just kind of snaps into place, and it only makes a sound when it actually makes that snap, as opposed to the kind of grinding sound that you get with the plastic version. So I'm going to stop yapping so you can hear the difference between the two. This one is the version 2. And now this one is the version 1. So I'd say this one feels a lot snappier and definitely feels a little bit more sturdy in its hinge as well. Like it feels pretty tight. And it's got the same resting positions as before, where it kind of looks like a laptop at this angle, then your typical angle that you'll actually play out, and then also a full 180 degrees. And yeah, it definitely feels smoother and snappier. And so I can see why people are going to find this to be an improvement. In all honesty, it still feels a little bit cheap and plasticky, but again, I don't really mind that. I've always been on the side where I kind of want my devices to feel like toys, and this one definitely does. It's just a little bit more smooth of an experience compared to the previous one. And so between the two, yes, even though I don't really mind the version 1, the version 2 is better. And I think this is going to be all around more appealing for people. So anyone who thought that the version 1 was broken or just wasn't very good may actually think that the version 2 is good at this point. If anything, I would say that this one now feels like it's probably going to last longer. Like I figured that my Flip 1 would probably last maybe a year or two and then kind of break, whereas this one feels like I could probably use it for a good 5 or 10 years. Now, 5 to 10 years from now, we will probably be playing other devices, given the fact that, you know, so many of these come out, but it is nice to just feel like this will last for a little bit longer. Okay, the next item on the list, it says that the shell material was upgraded to be stronger and anti-fingerprint. Now, one of the things I talked about in my previous Miyoo Flip videos is that two devices felt different than the other two. These ones, the yellow and the gray ones, have a more matte kind of texture to them. They have a powdery finish, and so I really enjoyed the feeling of these. The white and black ones were a little bit more slick and also very fingerprinty. And between my two yellow ones right here, I'm not feeling a difference between version 1 and version 2. So these both still have that nice matte feeling. However, let's take a look at the black versus black. So this is the version 2 and this one is the version 1. And hopefully the camera will pick up on this. I am filming in 4K, and you can see that there is a bit of a grittier texture on the one on the left. This is the version 2 versus the version 1. And so yes, I would say that the plastic texture here has changed. It also has a more matte and powdery feeling on the left one compared to the right, which is just kind of slick, and yes, also more fingerprinty. It's kind of hard to pick it up in this studio environment, but hopefully you can see that there are differences in the version 1 with the places that I've touched and those that I have not. Meanwhile, on the version 2, it seems to be a lot more uniform. Not perfect, but at least it doesn't feel like it's very fingerprinty. And in my original video, I remember saying that I don't like the feel of the black and the white models, to the point where I would rather use the yellow and gray ones. But now with this version 2 plastic, I would say that, yeah, you can basically get any of them. They're all going to feel the same. And I think that's great because I like the color scheme of the black one here. I like these subtle like X and Y buttons being a little bit red and then everything else being nice and black. Miyoo also sent me over the version 2 of the white model. I just don't have the upgraded gray one, but this one also has a different matte texture. I can see the V1 is still a little bit slick feeling, whereas the V2 has that more powdery finish. And so yeah, I think I like the white one a lot better on this one as well. This probably is still my least favorite of all the models just because I'm not a huge fan of these pastel colors. I wish they were a bit more vibrant and just kind of retro styled. Okay, number 3 on the list, it says the joystick is softer and no longer has the problem of unstable operation. I think what they mean by softer is that the version 1 sticks here on the left do have a little bit more resistance. Like it takes more force than you would expect to actually move this around all the way. Meanwhile, the new ones definitely are a little bit easier to move around. They don't feel loose or anything. They still feel very tight, but a lot similar to the PS Vita compared to this one, which I think was too stiff. And so I would say this is definitely an improvement. I like the lighter feeling of this joystick, and it really matches the D-pad and face buttons, which are also very light feeling. And so it's just a better match. Now, I'm not really sure what it means when they say the unstable operation has been fixed. I'm assuming that some people may have had missed inputs or something like that, but for me, these sticks have always been okay. Okay, number 4 on the list says that the L and R keys will not get stuck feeling good. Now that is a wonderful translation, and my guess here is that they're talking about the L1 and R1 buttons, since those are labeled as just L and R. And maybe there were some people who were having stuck buttons, but for me, I've never had any issues with these shoulder buttons, and they feel pretty good. They are very light to the touch, and I love the fact that they are super quiet. Same thing with these triggers over here. They're not the best things in the world. Obviously, you'd want to have like stacked shoulders and triggers to get the best overall optimized experience, but you know, when it comes to something just lightweight that you're playing on the go, I think it's just fine. The only difference I can feel between the version 1 here on the left and the version 2 is that it does feel like they're a little bit springier on the version 2, like they're bouncing up a little bit more easily than they were on the version 1. Again, I never really had these getting stuck, but this definitely seems like it's preventing it either way. Okay, and the final point that I have here is it says that the firmware is upgraded, the Bluetooth driver has been updated, and that charging efficiency is higher. And yes, it does look like the firmware has been updated. So this one is based off of November of 2024, whereas this one is February of 2025. So yes, we are working with a new firmware version. We also have a new Bluetooth option within the settings. And so let's see if I can actually get this to work. I'm going to put my Bluetooth controller in X input pairing mode, then I'm going to turn on Bluetooth, and let's see if it can actually find it. And, well, we're actually seeing a bunch of stuff here, but let's see if we can find, yeah, there it is, the 8-bit DO SM30 Pro. So, yeah, we're actually able to connect, at least as far as the settings go. And there we go, it said device connected and made a little bit of rumble, and so, yeah, look at that. I can actually now navigate through with Bluetooth. So Bluetooth seems to be working at least on the stock operating system. Now, one thing I've also read online is they've updated the screen, and you can see that it's actually a lot brighter. These are both at 7 out of 10, but you can see that this one is a lot brighter. Even if we go up all the way, yes, this one seems to work better just in a brighter environment. But it's also worth noting that this older version does get dimmer if we go to 0 out of 10. And so if you're looking for something to play in the dark, the version 1 would probably be better. But I think for the most part, if you are going to be playing the Miyoo Flip, you're probably going to be taking it around with you, which means that you might be in a bright environment, like outdoors or in your car or whatever, and having a brighter screen is a good thing. And so I would say this is an improvement as well. They also said that the charging efficiency has improved, so let's actually test that out. I'm using the Moonbase here from Genki, which they sent out, and it actually has 3 different USB-C ports at different power levels. So starting with the first one, which is 140 watts, you can see that it is not charging at all. It should go orange right here. Also trying this very last port here, which is a 30-watt charge, it's also not charging. So USB-C fast delivery may not be working altogether. We're also going to try this charging brick from Ugreen, 160 watts, and we've got a bunch of different options. If we try the high-powered laptop/tablet one, yes, it also does not charge. Same thing with the low-powered USB-C 3 one, also does not work. The only one I could actually get to charge was your standard USB-A port going in here to USB-C. And so, yes, you probably cannot do C-to-C fast charging with most bricks. There might be a couple that works depending on the cable as well as the charger, but as it stands right now, yes, a typical USB-A to USB-C input is the only one that I would reliably charge with this version 2. Okay, so that's what we're looking at with the version 2 of the Miyoo Flip. It's got better plastics, especially on the white and black models, and the hinge is improved. It feels a lot snappier and just a little bit more pro. The joysticks are also easier to use, and they say that they've improved the L and R buttons. I'm not really seeing it, but yes, this is something they must have worked on. In addition, we've got new firmware, which includes Bluetooth, and it does work. And then finally, the charging efficiency has been fixed, but it's still the same old song and dance, where you really are just going to have to use a standard USB-A to USB-C charger. Now, I've made a couple videos about the Miyoo Flips already, at least with the version 1, so the impressions as well as the review, and a lot of my findings still stand. And so what I want to do for the rest of this video is go over two quick topics. The first is why you probably will not want the Miyoo Flip, and why you may actually want it as well. And we'll kind of go over the bad and the good with the device at the same time. So let's start by talking about some of the reasons why you may not want the Miyoo Flip, even the version 2, which has some upgrades to it. The number one thing here is the price point, because it's not a great value compared to other handhelds. It is still going for $80 directly from Miyoo, as well as from like third-party suppliers like Keep Retro. I'll leave them linked down below in case the price goes lower, but yeah, you can expect about $80 for one of these. And the thing is, it's not a super good value compared to other devices on the market, even some with a similar form factor. Its biggest competitor is the Anbernic RG35XX SP, and this one you can often find on sale for like $50, $60, and so it's quite a bit cheaper than the Miyoo Flip. This one also has a bunch of additional software options, including things like Newly and Moo OS, which really drive home just the overall experience of this device. If I had to choose between the two for newcomers to pick up, I would probably still recommend the Anbernic, just because you've got so many other options to work with. It's been around for a while. It also doesn't hurt that it's cheaper and has a very similar form factor, so a lot of the things that I like about the Miyoo Flip are the same between these two. Also, if you're looking around the $50 price point, another device I would recommend considering is the TrimUI Brick. This one has a much better screen. It's a little bit smaller, it's 3.2 inches, but a higher resolution, which makes everything look a lot crisper and cleaner. And so when we're talking about value, I think that the Miyoo Flip is not really there. It's $80 compared to something that you can get for around $50 or $60, which in many ways is going to be better. The Miyoo Flip is also a device that just feels relatively cheap. Even with this upgraded hinge, it just feels like something that's more of a toy. And I know some people won't want that. They want something a little bit more sleek and premium, and I think the TrimUI Brick is just a better feeling in that regard. The other thing to bear in mind is that the software options on this device, even though it uses a pretty common chipset, are still relatively limited. And that's just because some of these development teams haven't really been spending a lot of time on it. As far as software options, we've got the stock operating system that comes with the card on your device, and that's going to be preloaded with games, and you can get in and out of those games pretty easily. So it's not a deal breaker for me, but the custom options that usually you will see crop up with other devices just really aren't there compared to something like the Anbernic. We've also got MinUI, which is a very simple operating system. It's the one that I use on this device, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We've also got a couple alpha builds of stuff that is work in progress, including things like Newly, and there was also a version of Rocknex that came out for a little bit, and then it was taken down. And so we've still got some software work that needs to be done. And so at least right now, if you're looking for something that you can tinker around with and have a little bit more options to work with, it's going to be the Anbernic compared to the Miyoo. It really depends on what you're looking for, but for me personally, I think that this is still a bit of a work in progress. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, because there are some things I really love about the Miyoo Flip. Like I mentioned before, it's one of my most played handhelds so far this year. The number one thing has to do with its portable size. It's basically a dead ringer for the original Game Boy Advance SP. Basically the same size as this old nostalgic block right here. And that is quite a bit smaller than the Anbernic. You can see right here that we have about a half finger length between the two in terms of overall width. The Miyoo is also a little bit thinner, and I realize the difference is somewhat subtle here in the video, but holding them in the hand is kind of a night and day difference. The Anbernic kind of feels like, something that's a little bit bigger and more modern and chunky, like made for an adult-sized hand. But for me, the Miyoo Flip is a better balance. It's very pocketable. It reminds me of the original Game Boy Advance SP, and it's still quite big when you have it opened up and you can actually use it. And the size difference for me really does count, because it's the difference between which one I actually pick up and take with me. And I'm a lot more apt to grab the Miyoo Flip, just because it is that much smaller and more pocketable. As far as gaming itself, you don't really lose a lot, because they're the exact same screen size, 3.5 inches, and the button layout is about the same. The Miyoo Flip also has the advantage of having analog sticks, and even though you may not use them very often, it's always nice to have them when you do need them. And then also in terms of hardware, I just really love these buttons. Like, they are whisper quiet. They have such a nice resistance to them, and they're super light to the touch. And so just one of my favorite experiences overall is just using these buttons on this device. Over the past couple months, I've been using the yellow version the most, and this obviously is a version 1, which has that worse hinge, but man, I love these buttons. Every time I open up this device to play it, I'm just reminded of how good these buttons really are. Probably one of my favorite experiences with a clamshell, hands down. The other thing I've really come to enjoy about this device is the software. Now, I mentioned before that it is very limited, but I kind of like those limitations because using a version of MIUI that's been perfectly tweaked has been just perfect for me. For the most part, I like to stick with the retro systems. So things like Game Boy, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, up to PlayStation 1, that's about all I actually want to play, and that's exactly what I have set up here on my MIUI build. In addition, I've taken the time to go through and add box art for each of these, so I can navigate through and actually see the name of the game and the box art as I scroll through, and so I've really enjoyed that. In addition, getting in and out of these games is super easy. I can just go through here, press the A button, and the game starts up almost instantly. Like, it's super fast and just really easy to get in and out of. And of course, when I'm done playing the game, I can just press the menu button and then I can save my progress, or I can just quit out of it. I can also use hotkeys to do this without getting into the menu. I've also customized a bunch of collections, which are basically like favorites lists. So I've gone through here, picked out some of my favorite franchises, and then I can go through and actually pick them out and play these games one by one. And the box art and everything else carries over. I've got a MIUI guide on my website which will include how to set up box art and stuff like that. It was actually made for the TrimUI brick, but the process is very, very similar. So even though I did mention that the software options are limited, this one has really just stuck with me because I can get in and out of my games and all that stuff just works really well. For example, if I'm in the middle of a game, all I have to do is actually just close up the screen itself. It'll put the device to sleep. After 2 minutes, it'll actually power off the device and save where I was. Next time I'm ready to play it, I can just open it up, power it back on, and I'll go right back to where I was in the game. And that's exactly what I want with a clamshell, because for me, a clamshell is something that you're going to travel around with, which means that you want to jump in and out of your games as easily as possible. And I think the Miyoo Flip really fits in that regard when using MIUI. There are limitations to what you can do in that software, including, playing some of the higher end systems that this can play, like Dreamcast and Nintendo 64. There are add-on packs for that, so you can actually add them into MIUI if you would like, but I've really enjoyed the simple simplicity of just the entire setup right here. So long story short, yes, the software is limited, but this one works for me. It's not going to work for everybody, but this is why I've enjoyed the Miyoo Flip so much. So there we go. Those are all the upgrades with the version 2 of the Miyoo Flip, and some of them are significant, including this hinge, which I do think feels a lot more sturdy now. We also talked about some of the reasons why you may not want to get this device, and a couple of the reasons why I like it so much, which kind of steer me towards that direction. At the end of the day, I still have a hard time recommending it because the price is quite high compared to others on the market, and the software options are still limited. I still think it's a device that 6 months from now we might say is a much better deal if the price goes down and we have more software options for it and it really comes into its own. So this probably is not going to be my last Miyoo Flip video. I'm going to wait and see and just kind of watch how software develops for it, and then I'll make another video when I think that maybe the dynamic has changed a little bit. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is $80 worth it for the version 2 Miyoo Flip, or does it still need time to cook? As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful, and we will see you next time. Happy gaming.